All right. Good morning, everyone. Let's get started. I mean, there are few more people who are trying to log on, but I think it's important to respect the time of the people who logged on time and who are here for this webinar uh, to learn something new. So, good morning, all of you. My name is Vinesh Sukumaran. I'm the principal consultant at Bodhih Training Solutions Private Limited. Uh, I'd like to quickly take you through what the flow of this workshop is going to be. First is we will start by taking a look at who we are, who Bodhi is. We will then take a look at how can you produce some of the results that you want through training interventions. We'll also take a look at how to be a successful manager or an effective leader, especially from a training perspective. We'll move on to the different dimensions of training success and how to use them and producing the results that you want and ensuring greater training effectiveness. And finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. So you can, okay, so those of you who just joined, could you please mute yourself? Yeah, thank you. If you have questions, you can please ask me through the chat screen. I'll be happy to answer them. You don't have to wait for the end of this webinar to ask questions, though according to the flow, the Q&A is right at the end. You can ask me questions anytime in between, and I will answer them at the relevant point in the webinar. So you will be hearing me through your audio system, so you can keep that loud and clear. You can mute yourself, you can mute your microphone, and if you have questions, you can ask me through the chat screen. Okay, so what does Bodhi do? For those of you who are not familiar with Bodhi, we are primarily in the business of organizational development. We mostly work with corporates. 95% of our clientele is corporate, and our approach to OD issues is by providing solutions, by training individuals, and by developing individuals. And this happens through uh, training in different areas like soft skills, HR, communication, and so on. Some more facts about Bodhi. We have worked with close to 500 clients. We have a very structured framework to training. So those of you who are looking at attending our trainer certification workshop, that's something that you will certainly learn that framework and our approach to training. We also have a very hands-on and experiential model. So every one of our workshops is designed so that participants actively contribute and learn through the process of contributing. You will hardly find any of our workshops which are lecture based, which have people just sitting back and listening to things. Okay. All right. We are also an ISO company. We've been certified by this elite German body called TUV TÜV, and all the processes that we follow for creation as well as delivery of workshops are based on ISO standards. And in recent times, we've been quite active on Facebook. So those of you who are, active yourselves on the social media, you can look for us, look for Bodhi Training on our Facebook page. You will get to know what we are doing these days. There's a lot of interesting activity going on, which you can tap into. Okay, so let's get into the crux of this workshop. For those of you who just came in, good morning to all of you. My name is Vinesh. We've just gotten done with the introduction. So, about producing results in the training area, one of the great dangers these days is that there are many trainers out there. I know some of you are not trainers and are looking at becoming trainers, but nevertheless, you must be aware that there are a lot of trainers out there who are just looking at number of training days as opposed to what results the training is producing. So the first step towards producing results is what we call analysis, where you're understanding what the problem is. You're also taking a look at, is training the real solution for it? Because sometimes, I remember doing a workshop at, I don't want to name the company, but they're in a very, what should I say, unknown city, and nobody really wants to work there. And they wanted to do a workshop on conducting good quality interviews and getting the right talent into the organization. And I told them, look, one of the reasons you're not attracting the right talent is because of where your company is located, and there's very less that we can do about it. I mean, if you move to Bangalore or Delhi or one of these places, then I'd be happy to, help you out on this. So sometimes training is in fact not the solution, but when the solution is training, then you can see how you want to contribute, what kind of training. Would a one-day session suffice, or does the kind of problem that the company is facing call for a 6-month intervention? So that's something that will certainly help you produce better results. Secondly, is the aspect of designing. So even looking at what's the duration of the program, how many people should be trained in one shot. Are you better off training people 2 days at a stretch or one day at a time, one day every week? Even these are aspects of design. So once you've understood what a client requires, uh, and when I say client, it could be a company out there, it could also be within your organization, a particular department, a team, a group, and so on. The next step is looking at development. So assume you went and spoke to an organization or a department, and they had a problem with their interpersonal effectiveness. So you ask them more questions, and you really learn how to do this well in our train the trainer certification. We derived a lot of ideas from the entire field of consulting. The kind of work that companies like McKinsey and Boston Consulting do. And then you look at designing something which will cater to that interpersonal, effectiveness problem that they're facing. So say you design a half day workshop on building rapport and another half day workshop on being there for each other. The development part is about creating the content for it, whether it's through video, with audio, a manual, handouts, questionnaires. That's what happens in development. And it has to be in alignment with your design. And the last part, or the next part, is really implementation. So unfortunately, many train the trainer certifications today focus primarily on implementation or training delivery. Well, delivery is important, no doubt about that, but I've realized increasingly in all these years that I've been in the training space and in the consulting world, the actual delivery of the program is becoming less and less and less important in the whole scheme of things. It is just one more important thing. I mean, you could deliver a great program, but if you deliver it in the wrong area, your feedback could be fantastic, but problems before could continue to be problems after. And of course, the next step is to evaluate. This is what we just discussed is called the ADDIE model. Okay, it's a very popular model which many companies in India, unfortunately, claim ownership over. It's not something that's owned by Bodhih. It's a model that was propounded initially in the U.S. Army and U.S. Air Force to train the personnel, and later a lot of other companies across the world lifted it. I'm proud to say that we have, but what's important is we've used it rather effectively with all our clients across, across the country, and we are the chosen vendors for many companies like Microsoft, SAP, and so on. I mean, we also chosen vendors for IIM Bangalore, and we've been able to use this approach rather well and effectively. So I want to just point out one thing here. Now you see this dotted line all across. So what makes this model really sturdy is to have an evaluation at each stage. So for example, you've gone to a department and they have a problem with interpersonal skills. You design a module, you will go back and check with the stakeholders. You will evaluate it right there and not after the whole program is over. You will evaluate it right there and see, is my thinking on having a half day session on rapport building and another half day session on being there for each other, does that meet your requirement? And the person might say yes, no, kind of, and so on, and then you move on to the next step. Likewise, you develop a module or a workbook. You will go back and look at. I mean, if you're doing 2 half days, the workbook is 50 pages, and there's just 2 pages on rapport building, and say 48 pages on being there for each other. It is inconsistent. So that's the next part of evaluation. Likewise, you will obviously deliver what you designed and developed. And the final part of evaluation is you will go back and look at Does that problem in the area of interpersonal skills still exist? If it does, obviously you've not done too well as a trainer. And if it doesn't, then I think you crack the case. All right. I see some of you just come in. Good morning. My name is Vinesh. We're well into the program, so you can continue listening to the webinar. I'm sure you still take back a lot of things. Okay, so that's the next part. I see some questions here. Okay, I hope my voice is not cracking now. Somebody who said my voice is cracking. I hope it's clear. Okay, it should be clear now. Uh, there are one or two more questions. Okay, so let me. There's a question by one of the participants here, which says, "Is this model, this ATDI model, how much of training is required for this?" Well, to answer your question, Prashant, it's like this. I've noticed this in my career, and to be very honest, I learned the ADDIE model much later. Uh, so even left alone, if you were to tell somebody, look, now you're a trainer, you are responsible for this project management department, or you're responsible for this client, you have to take care of all their training requirements. Even if you just did that, invariably you will end up following this model, because what's the first thing that you'll do if you want to just deliver a program? The stakeholder will ask you, or you might even ask yourself, what do I want to deliver? And then you'll be forced to go and have a conversation with somebody there and say, what is the training that you're looking for? What's the problem here? What's the challenge that you're facing? What do you want to develop? What do you want your team to get better at? And then once you've done that, you can't jump straight to implementation. You have to design a module, you have to develop it. So in a way, it's a very natural sort of consultative approach to training. And you know what you'll really get trained on, if you attend our train the trainer certification, is that there are a lot of nuances in this. There are a lot of areas where you could really goof up, and that's what happens to a lot of people in the training market. They have been sort of incompletely trained on some of these things. The half-baked lot who get into the training space and they become trainers, and not really delivering results. So that's some you learn the nuances of each of these steps. I mean, just to give you an example, once you've had a conversation with a client and then you want to deliver a module, the next step is the client is going to ask you, what do you plan to do? And you have to send them a design. So what kind of documentation goes into it? What must the design look like actually if you send it through an email? What works better? Does a PPT work better, or a Word file, or a PDF of one of these? What should it have? What should it not have? How do you showcase your pricing? So these sort of nuances you will really pick up through the program, because at Bodhih we are doing this day in and day out. Like I said, we work with about 500 clients, and we have a very methodical approach which we have ourselves developed through a lot of times under the pressure of necessity, a lot of times through our own study internal processes which are ISO driven, and that's something that we'll be sharing with you. Okay, so I have another question here. I'm not going to answer that now, because there's a part in this webinar where it really fits into. I'm going to talk about it then. In the meantime, if you have other questions, you can put it up through the chat screen. I'll be happy to answer them. Thanks, Pritika. I'm glad you can hear me clearly now. Okay. So, how to manage and lead training effectively? Now, this is something that I want all of you to really take back, because this is an area where not just people in the training space, but even managers in general, leaders, find this challenging. The first part, as a trainer, as a learning and development professional, is to understand what are you trying to impart. So the K stands for the knowledge component. To put it bluntly, it means, what does the person need to know? Okay, so for example, let's talk about something like induction training. There are huge knowledge components there. Somebody who joins a company like Hewlett Packard, somebody who joins a company like you know Accenture, just just getting about going around doing what you have to do will require you to know certain things. Okay, and that's the knowledge component, which is the K. I'm going to come back and talk about each of these a little bit more. But the next part of it is S, or the skills. So what are the skills that you need to develop? A skill, to clarify what it means, is anything that you need to practice to get better at. That's the skill component. So typically in a lot of technical training, you need to develop certain skills, especially in the whole manufacturing and industrial segment. You know, like cutting is a skill, milling is a skill, grinding is a skill, polishing is a skill. I mean, for those of you in the IT world, even fast typing is a skill. Okay, so if you sit in front of the computer for the first time, you're not going to type fast naturally. It's something you have to learn about the QWERTY keyboard, which finger goes where, and then you'll start typing well. So that's a skill. And the third component is the A, or attitude. uh, One of the good definitions I've heard of attitude is it's a mental evaluative statement. Okay, that's really what an attitude is. It's a mental evaluative statement. So you look at something and say, yeah, I think that's good. I think that's bad. You look at something and you say, I agree, I disagree. That reflects your attitude. And I say attitude slash behavior because behavior is the manner in which your attitude comes out. Uh, Hi Spurti, I hope you can hear me better now. All right. Next, so what's the importance of this? The first step for you as a trainer or an L&D professional is to understand, are you addressing knowledge components or the knowledge dimension? Are you addressing the skill dimension? Or are you addressing the attitude slash behavioral dimension? Um, Sadly enough, many trainers are absolutely clueless about this. They're just doing a training program, and I mean, I spend a lot of my time watching other training programs and sitting through training sessions that other trainers are doing. And I asked them, during the tea break or lunch break, I asked them, where was the bigger focus in the first half of your session? Was it on knowledge, skills, or attitude? And this, people who are clueless will typically give you a response like, oh, all these are come together, and it's just it's not one particular thing, it's all of them, and so on. So if you know this, if you know the distinction between three of these, you would be able to address or ensure learning in a far more effective way, because you know exactly what you're gunning for. For example, uh, there is a sense that some things like teaching are not really upmarket and training is cooler and so on. I see many corporate trainers have this feeling that teachers are not there yet, and I don't think there's anything like that, because teaching is largely knowledge driven, and it has its own place. And the classic example which I've been giving many people is about, if you wanted to know where the different countries of the world are, for example, where does India lie in relation to Europe, in relation to a place like London, in relation to Australia, a place like Melbourne, or in relation to Russia, or anywhere else. To understand this, it's going to be pretty dumb to try out experiential learning. You're not going to take that person to all these countries or take them on a chopper or put them on a satellite to understand this. It's far easier to give them an atlas, just run them through it so that they know where the different countries are. So knowledge has its own space in the scheme of things. The second part of it is the skills. This typically comes into play in areas. A very typical example in this area is playing musical instrument. You normally say he's very skilled at playing the instrument, because to learn a musical instrument, you have to get to know a lot of things, you have to play it again and again, and then you get better at it each time you play it. So that's the skill component. And the third component is the attitude or behavior component. This is more about things like willingness, things like temperament, things like your comfort level with what you're being trained on, what you're trying to demonstrate. That's the attitude or behavioral component. So I told you earlier, one of the good definitions of attitude is It's a mental evaluative statement. Likewise, your behavior is a demonstration of your attitude. If you go stand in front of somebody, nobody really gets to see your attitude. But the moment you behave, the moment you smile, frown, people get to get to understand something about your attitude. Sometimes it's a judgment, sometimes it's accurate. I mean, that's a different field altogether. Uh, so if I take something like swimming, knowing some that knowing what the breaststroke is in terms of how to move your hands and legs, knowing what the butterfly is in terms of how to move your hands and legs, knowing where the swimming pool is, these are the knowledge components. A skill is actually being able to float on water. It's not something you get right the first time. Those of you who have tried swimming or who know about swimming, uh, should be aware of this. So there's a tipping point when you say, oh wow, I can float now. Oh wow, I can swim now. Wow, I can do the backstroke now. And then there is the last part, which is the attitude or behavior part, which is on a cold winter morning, are you willing to get into the pool and get into water? That's the that's really the attitude or behavior part. Okay. Are you going to go regularly to the pool? Like, how comfortable are you waking up in the morning, going to the pool, swimming, doing the same thing the next day, and again and again? Or are you a person who jumps from one, class to the other? You do swimming for a month, you work out in the gym for a month, you go for yoga classes for a month, but you don't really pursue anything. So those are your attitude or behavioral components. If you can pinpoint where the problem lies or what really you're trying to develop, then I think you do a much better job. In fact, one of the problems in India with respect to language training in states like Bihar, Kerala, various parts of the northeast, to a large extent even in the north and central India, is that people's knowledge is excellent. They know grammar extremely well, but they have no clue what to do with it. That's the skill component, which means that they don't know how to put it together and form sentences, and it just doesn't come out right. And they have accents. Accent neutralization is a skill. You practice it and then it comes out right. And finally, you have the attitude of behavior, which is: are you comfortable talking in English in front of new people? Are you comfortable talking in English in front of people who know the language better than you? Okay. Okay, so I do have a question here. What's this? Somnath says, "Dear Vinesh, due to voice break, I couldn't get K." Okay, I hope you caught that, Somnath. Okay, because I repeated that whole K, S, and A part of it. I hope you got that now. Okay. All right, so let me move on to the next part, which is dimensions of training success. Now, I spend a lot of time also meeting many of our clients for doing the pre-training and sometimes the post-training consultative work. And here's what I've noticed. You know, understanding needs is really the first step. If you do this well, you will even understand whether your presence there is required or not. Okay. I mean, I keep telling people, about clients. There's one particular client who I've spoken with, and they said, let's do a motivation program for our team. And then we said, great. And we asked them, what's the problem with the team? What area of motivation? And after asking them a few questions, we realized that they were all getting their salaries on the 20th and 21st of the following month. And we said, look, I don't think motivation is the problem here. In fact, I think they must be, you know, fabulously motivated to still continue to be here. So I think you need a chartered accountant rather than a training professional. So sometimes understanding the needs is even about spotting that. But the point that I want to make here is that there is something called prioritization. Okay, there is something where you understand what is the burning issue. You can even ask yourself. I want you to take a minute to just ask yourself this question. Ask yourself, what are 3 or 4 areas that you want to be trained on? Okay, just make a mental note of it. You don't need to put it up on the chat screen. Ask yourself, what are 3 or 4 areas that you need to be trained on? Okay, great. Now, prioritization means, what is that one big thing out of those 4 which will change your life immediately? What is that one big thing out of that four which is really the burning issue, which is really holding you back? And that's what I mean by prioritization. Because companies come and say, we want you to handle our training calendar, we want you to do 12 programs every month, and through the year we want to do about 200 programs and so on. One of the things I tell them is like, okay, hold on. Where do you want to start? We've got to start somewhere. Tell me what you want in the next 1 month, and why do you want that? Is that your best strategy? Okay, like an area like communication, I can straight away say would help anybody, irrespective of how the communication already is. So the question is your organization not performing? Is your department not performing? And in this case, in the question that I just asked you, are you not being your best self because of one particular area? And which out of those four is it? And in fact, I'd like to go one step back here. Since you did that prioritization, it would be interesting for you to now look at where does huge part of, if you said you should learn to manage people better. So what's the problem there? Do you not know things? Do you know things but you don't know how to implement it? This is a big problem because there are more self-help books out there which people are unable to use. If everybody read a self-help book and can put it to use the next day, I don't think we'd need trainers. So is it a skill component, or are you the kind of person who jumps from one self-help book to the other without really using it? Or do you not try out things? Another phenomenon which I've noticed is people like to keep jumping from one new concept to the other before they've learned the old concept well. Is that a problem that you have? So these are things that you want to ask yourself, and then you can accordingly build your knowledge, skill, or your attitude. Okay. So let me just move on. So the first one is organization need analysis, prioritization. There's also a development plan. So this is really the these two steps I can really talk about together, which is how do you want to roll out your project? Do you want to do one day every month, one day every week? Typically, just going back to the example of language training, it's rather silly to do a language enhancement program. Uh, you know, in what I call a plunge model. A plunge model is you plunge them into 4 days of training. It's not going to help. I mean, there are people who've been trying to speak better English for a lifetime. So you are better off having shorter sessions over a longer duration of time, over a longer period. So you can have 2 days every week, 2 half days every week spread over 6 months, 1 hour every day spread over 3 months, something like that. So deciding your development plan, your execution interventions, are you just going to train or are you going to have post-training hand-holding sessions? Even these are part of your execution interventions. In fact, are you going to have a few more meetings before you roll out the actual training? That's also part of this. Then we move on to reviewing results. So after you've made the plan, delivered it, you look at what results you produced. Did you, are those people speaking better? Did the person learn how to swim? Did, what should I say, did the team which wasn't communicating well with each other, are they a better team now? Are they communicating well? Okay. So this is about reviewing results. Then it's about performance enhancement. And, I want to emphasize on this because a lot of times what happens is training areas are looked at in isolation. One of the reasons why many people in HR and training, I'm sorry to say, have a bad reputation is because they're not looking at this. You say, okay, great, I want a program on presentation skills. So the trainer comes and does a program on presentation skills. Presentation skills improve a bit. Okay. Now, the larger question is, why did that department want a program on presentation skills? Maybe they wanted their sales team to present better. Why should the sales team present better? Not just to become polar presenters, maybe to bring in greater sales into the company, to generate more revenue. Did that happen? And that's the real question. Okay, so that is the performance enhancement part of the cycle. I have a question here from somebody, Manish. Sorry, one second, Manisha. So Manisha says, can you please explain execution of interventions again? Yeah, I'm going to do that, Manisha. Let me just finish the cycle. I'll go back to execution and talk a little bit more about that. And finally, there's a roadmap for improvement. So let me sort of answer Manisha's question here. What are execution interventions? How are you going to execute this training? Are you going to do a webinar? Like right now, what I'm doing is an execution intervention. Are you going to give them some reading material, pre-training and post-training? That's one of the execution interventions. Are you going to do a training program for 2 days and then post-training coaching sessions for 6 months? Those are execution interventions. Are you going to do a weekly follow-up? Those are execution interventions. So what happens in the development plan is that you prioritize a training area. So if let me just do a quick recap. If you start by saying this company X or this department X needs to be trained on communication skills, team building, and planning. You say the burning issue right now is really communication skills, and then you make a development plan. That is how you're going to you know uh, do the training. If you're going to do it through webinars, then your entire content will be developed through e-content, which can be webinar driven. If you're going to do it through activities, your entire content will become activity based content, maybe games, props, exercises, activity sheets. So that's what happens in development. Execution of interventions is really rolling out those interventions and also freezing on what are those execution interventions. If you decide, what happens in most cases is trainers just decide to do a training need analysis and finally delivering of a training program, and then they exit the party. I think it would make sense to look at a lot more things. And then you review results. Review results is starting with, did the training go well? Did the coaching session go well? Did the follow-up go well? All this is reviewing results. And performance is looking at, I mean, I'm sure if you ask any trainer, he will tell you there surely have been training programs where the feedback form said wonderful things, but the team which got trained didn't really improve on the area in which they got trained. That means performance enhancement didn't really take place. And finally, roadmap for improvement. How do you ensure that the training doesn't stop at the door? How do you ensure that people continue to learn even after they walk out of the room? That's really the roadmap for improvement. And there are a lot of things being done these days, starting from online approaches, creating focus groups. Like I did a workshop the week before last, and it was a presentation effectiveness workshop. And one of the things I suggested, the management later told me these people need to present, and the presentation opportunities are not so high. So they might present once in 2 months. So I don't want them to forget what they learned. So one of the suggestions I made to them is to form an internal team which does a session, say every Friday evening from 5 to 6, where they come and present 5 wonderful ideas which helps their organization. And what happens is, in the process, not only does this team share knowledge and improve others, they also enhance their own presentation skills. Okay, so that's one of the importance of roadmap. So Manisha, thanks, you say you get it. Yeah, so this is after the program design part is the development. Okay, there's another question here. As trainers, this is from Devjani. Devjani says, as trainers, should we not also incorporate the ROI angle as one of the dimensions? Yes, Devjani, the performance enhancement. In fact, how do you know somebody is performing? There are multiple ways. One of the ways is ROI. Okay, and this is typically what people higher up the ladder would ask you. Even if you go there and pitch a training program, they're going to ask you, what's my ROI? But somebody who's more technical, somebody who's a coach, if you're talking to an L&D manager who comes from really, the technical side of things, or the behavioral side of things, that person could ask you, would the behavior change? Would this person become more interactive? Would the communication improve? That's also an indication of performance. Okay, we have a couple of questions here. Um, okay, Shubhra says, If it is a communication skills training and participants fail the post-training exam, then what do we do? Okay, so Shubhra, let me just tell you, fail the exam, what do we do? So, there are different ways in which you measure the effectiveness of your program. One of them, let me just talk about very quickly about the popular Donald Kirkpatrickson model. Very effective model, also called as the four-level model. The first step of the Donald Kirkpatrickson model is what we call the reactionary. You finish the program. How does the program look to people? How does the feedback look? That's the feedback form. The second step of the Donald Kirkpatrickson model is an assessment. How much has the person learned? So you can give a written assessment, you can give a hands-on assessment. So, I mean, I'd like to very quickly go back to this. Ideally, your assessment should assess or test the knowledge, test the skills, and the attitude or behavior. That's when it's a well-rounded of assessment. Okay. And the third step of the Donald Kirkpatrickson model is to actually look at behavior change. That means if you're training a communication, Shubhra, you said you're doing a communication skills training. What skills are you training them on? Say if you train them on listening skills, did they become better listeners? That's the question. Did they start listening better? Did they start asking the right questions, for example? Okay. This is the third level. And the last and final level of the Donald Kirkpatrickson model is ROI. And ROI means uh, they had to communicate better for what? Not just to become better human beings. I'm sure there are business implications. Maybe the customer service rating has to go up because this is a customer service team that you trained on communication skills. After doing this entire circus, did the customer service rating go up? If it did, then I think you scored well on it. We have one more. Somnath saying, I conduct the training in a very active manner where they enjoy. Okay, that's good, Somnath. The feedback given my client and superiors is excellent, but the training, whatever is given, is not implemented on the real ground. Kindly suggest me how to go about it. Thank you. To my message, Q&A is also how to change the A. Okay, so Somnath, I mean, I completely understand your problem because it is a huge challenge today where, I mean, we have many clients who tell us, I want this training to be effective. I want to make sure that the training doesn't stop at the door. How do we make sure? I mean, one of the clients recently also told me, you know, so many trainers have come and gone. They've done trainings. The training is really good. How do you make sure that change happens? And my suggestion to you is you can try this. These are some things that have worked for Bodhih in recent times, and I'm pretty sure they could also work for you. One thing you can certainly try is get them. First of all, your training should not be a knowledge sharing session alone. If you do that, no matter how much you try, post training, the effectiveness impact is going to be less. So my suggestion to you is first evaluate your own training. Make sure you're not just sharing knowledge. And that's one of the huge problems that many trainers have. And that's exactly what our Train the Trainer certification tells you not to get stuck at. Okay, so that's the first step. Make sure you also have skill and ability elements in your training, skill and attitude elements in your training. This is something that will straight away ensure post training effectiveness. Okay, so Somnath, the first step, don't get locked with knowledge sharing. If it is just knowledge sharing, you can just throw a book at them and ask them to go back home and read it. That's good enough, right? Unless it is some unique piece of knowledge that you know and they don't know. So make sure they develop skills. So if it is something, going back to what was asked by Shubhra, if it is something like communication, get them to communicate in the program. Get them to practice that listening skill, practice the questioning skill. Okay, this is one part. The second part is get them to practice it till they become excellent at it. And that's been one of my recent observations. I mean, I've been practicing this for a long time, but in recent times I've been sharing this with a lot of people, and they've been also able to produce results because of this. So what you do is, if you're training somebody on, say, let me just take a communication example again. If you're training somebody on, voice modulation, get them to practice voice modulation in the room, in your training session, from a skill perspective, okay? Not just till they get it right. That's not good enough. Getting it right is just the starting point. It's not an ending point. Let them get it right again and again and again and again. When they get it right so many times, they have no doubts in their head that they can modulate their voice again when they want to. And when they know that they can do it, yeah, you know how human beings are, they love showing off. If they can do something well, they'll want to go out there and practice it. And then what they do is they go out there and they practice voice modulation. And because they do that, that attitude or that behavior of demonstrating what they learned, okay, they're able to do that quite well. So just to reiterate, one of the things that you can do is, if you want post training effectiveness, if you want to make sure they use things at the flow, first step, your training should be uh, not knowledge based, it should have skill and attitude dimensions to it. Secondly, you should get them to practice demonstrating that ability. You know, the whole word competence, all these three together is called a competence. The knowledge, the skill, and attitude together is called a competence. You should get them to demonstrate that competence in the training room before they leave. Not just till they get it right, but till they're able to do it right again and again and again, till they develop a level of comfort. Developing a level of comfort is the attitude or behavior. And then they'll take it back and use it on the floor. So that's what I have to say. I have another question here by Nayan. So Nayan, the question is, what is the best method to evaluate effect of training? What is the best method through which we can present management effectiveness of training in organizations? Okay, now, like I shared with you, the Donald Kirkpatrickson method is something that's popularly used. You could use that. It's called the four-level model. You could also, employ that model. It's a very popular model. That's something that I just shared. My suggestion to you, Nayan, is one of the things that has helped many of our trainers is, if you approach the training with the mindset of making a difference. Because unfortunately for many people, not just in the training field, in all fields, the work they do has just become a ritual. The work they do is nothing more than a tick mark. Come in the morning, finish this, go for lunch, come back, go back home. You know, if you can focus on, by the way, Nayan, I'm not suggesting that you're doing this, okay? But what I'm saying is, if you approach the training with the idea of developing competency, the idea of developing a new ability, the idea of getting them to demonstrate it, go out there and make a difference, you will function differently. And I think, in my view, more than which model you use, the model that's running inside a trainer's head is far more critical. Okay. All right. So let me move on to really the last part, which is about getting targeted results and ensuring greater effectiveness. So, what can we do in this area? Well, there are some of my own observations I've translated into a model, and I sort of had fun with this and made it cliched, because in all management and leadership books, you find four P's, four M's, five Z's, and so on. So I call this the 4C model, and I think that's also easier for you to remember. The first part is credibility. Okay, if you want to produce results and be effective as a trainer, the first step is you've got to be credible. And when I say credible, people have, I mean, I'm really sorry to say, but the whole field of training today, uh, one of my recent mantras has been that, training, coaching, uh, and others which I don't want to mention, but these are fields which have probably attracted the worst of talent. People who could not communicate became communication trainers. People who could not sell became sales trainers. People who themselves were pathetic managers became management trainers, and so on. So, training as a field has low credibility. My suggestion to you is, if you work on just changing that and building your own credibility, when you walk into a room and say, I mean, if you walk into a room and tell somebody that you're a leadership trainer, the next question that they're going to ask you is, what kind of a leader are you? What have you led? What are your leadership credentials? And when I say leadership credentials, beyond just an MBA, beyond just qualification, what have you done is the real question. And I think if you can showcase something strong, so my suggestion to all of you, if you want to become trainers, and this is something that we tell our participants, is that if you want to become a good trainer, you should be walking the talk. You should be producing results. I mean, I know some fantastic trainers who go to a company and say, okay, you're having 14% attrition, I will bring it down to 4, please pay me only after that. I'm not going to charge you before that. And to do that, somebody who asked the question earlier, Manisha, to do that, the trainer might do a training session, he might give them a book to read, he might do follow-up coaching sessions, he might watch them on the job and give them feedback. All these things could be done one after the other in parallel, whatever. But at the end of the day, results are produced, and then, you know, the story is complete. So that's the first step to produce results and being effective. I have a question here from, okay, I have two questions here. One is from Lata, which says, is your training effective? Is if you're using a content method by someone else? Okay, yeah, thanks, Lata. I mean, that's really what credibility is. You're right. Harsh, sometime organization driven procedure mandates employee to attend training. Okay, they come just to sit and wait when it will get completed. How to make the audience realize that they actually need training? Okay, so Harsh, I can really see from your questions, Mr. Harsh Trivedi, that you're somebody who's really been standing there doing trainings, because these are all issues that I myself have encountered. So let me answer your question very quickly. There are, as Harsh rightly puts it, a group of participants who are just pushed into the room and they don't really want to be in the training, but they're there. This is called a thumped audience. A thumped audience means you're, it's like somebody is hitting you and pushing you into the room. Yes, there is an audience like that. One of the things that has, let me quickly tell you what has worked for me. What really works is, one is establishing your credibility. People are interested to listen to Robin Sharma compared to listen to XYZ speaker, because, or listen to some regular Joe, because Robin Sharma has built a certain credibility. He's written a book. He's a sought after speaker, and so on. So my suggestion to you is, build your own credibility. The same message which you give, if somebody else gives it, like your parents tell you throughout your life, wake up early, and people don't necessarily follow it. But when Robin Sharma says, join the 5 o'clock club, people say, wow, what a great idea. I mean, he's basically saying, wake up early, right? So that's one thing. Another thing that works, Harsh, is uh, telling, the whole world is about what's in it for them. Participants come for the program, sit there because the managers told them to attend it. Fine, no problem. But whenever I have encountered participants, like I did an interviewing skills program recently, and what happened is, there were participants sitting there saying, "Yeah, I've conducted 100 interviews, I've conducted 200 interviews. Do I really need this program?" With that sort of an attitude. The moment I told them, I have done this program in some of the best companies in the world, including companies like McKinsey, Coca-Cola, uh, last week I did a program, for a company called Oil India, and so on. I gave them some names, but more importantly, I realized that some of the best companies are following this method of interviewing today. And if you sit through this program, it will not just make you a better interviewer, it will also make you a better interviewee. Because some of the best companies are using this method, it will make you tomorrow a better candidate to attend this interview, these kinds of interviews. And you should have seen the amount of seriousness that came in after that. So that's certainly something that works, and that's certainly something that I suggest you use. Okay. Okay, so Lata, to very quickly answer your question, Bodhi uses some of the best content compiled from multiple sources in the world, so we don't claim ownership over those things. We acknowledge it to those people who produce that content. But at the same time, we also have some of our own content in the Train the Trainer, a lot of our own content, so it's a combination of both. Okay, we don't believe in creating something new for the sake of it, when there's a lot of created stuff which is useful and would benefit people. The next part of producing results is competence. There is no question about the fact that you've got to be competent. If you're a communication trainer, your communication's got to be excellent. I once met a trainer. His opening statement, or I was watching him train, his opening statement was, don't do what I do what I say. So please don't be a trainer like that, because participants are not going to listen to what you say alone. They're going to also see what you're doing. So if you're going to train somebody on neutralizing an accent, you better have a neutral accent. You're going to train somebody on time management, you better land up to the program on time, be well timed with your sessions, and finish on time. Okay, so competence certainly, and competence has three parts: the knowledge, skills, and attitude. That's certainly something for you to develop. Okay, next is the convergence. This is really for those of you who are training on an organization-wide basis. One of the things that trainers miss out, or one of the things, in my view, which makes an organization, is everybody going in the same direction? So if your organization stands for changing the world, changing the world through technology, for example, that's what your organization is all about. Is every person getting trained moving in that direction? Like, if you're a trainer who walks into such a company, let's call the company XYZ, and their motto and what they really stand for is changing the world through technology. Every training that you do, whether you're training them on communication skills, on planning and organizing, on managerial effectiveness, whatever, it should have the larger focus of changing the world. How can you, how can your management style impact your people and in turn help them change the world? How can your communication help change the world? How can your presentation skills help you present technology so well that it changes the world? That is really what I mean by convergence. Looking at, is your training catering to the larger picture? This is what I call high leverage training. Is your training high leverage? Okay. Okay, I have, who is this? Pritika. Yes, Pritika. Okay, I have a couple of people who didn't hear that. Let me do a quick recap. So, competence means you've got to be competent in the area where you are training on, in your area of expertise. So, if you're a voice trainer, you've got to be able to use your voice really well. So competence is really, these are closely related. Credibility is about, can I trust you as a trainer? Competence is about, do you have, you could be very competent, but still with low credibility. Let me give you a classic example. Like, there's a trainer who I was coaching, and this was one of his problems. He was excellent in his own level of motivation, drive, very upbeat and so on. He had the competence. But one of the issues with him was that he didn't have credibility. He had never been able to build that in somebody else. He was never able to build that on, make somebody else have the same kind of motivation. So you could be competent, but not having credibility. And I think both are important. In fact, all these three are important, including the last one, which is change. And what I mean by that is, one of the big challenges which I find with trainers is that they don't change with how markets are changing, how companies are changing. uh, and so on. So the point that I'd like to make here is, don't do the training that you're doing today even after 10 years. That means you've not really moved ahead. I mean, I see some trainers who I worked with, 10, 12 years ago, and I look at their programs today, they're still using the same exercises. Well, I'm completely all right with them using the exercises because of effectiveness, but it scares me when a trainer, after years, is using the same exercises, examples sometimes, even the same examples and anecdotes, who's using the same thing because of lack of his own learning or his own adaptability to change. So, if you want to be effective as a trainer, you need to change with what's going on around you. You can't, for example, to give you a simple example, a freelance trainer who only does, say, leadership programs. When he goes to a Google, what he talks about, examples he uses, anecdotes he uses, and his style of delivery uh, should not be the same as if he went later to a company like ONGC. I mean, in fact, even his clothes should change, even his style of dressing should change, his style of speaking should change. You know, because if you're not able to do that, I think your effectiveness and your ability to produce results as a trainer would suffer. Okay. Uh, we have a question here. Kritika says, I didn't understand the convergence. Okay, so let me explain convergence again. Convergence is really about looking at the larger picture. If, for example, you're training an organization, okay, and that entire organization, for example, let's take Apple. Apple has really been about challenging the status quo. Now, when you do a training program there, I think the training program itself should challenge the status quo, because when an Apple employee, comes for a training program, he's looking at thinking different. He's looking at how different is the training program, how different are the techniques I'm learning, how different is the style of delivery. So, one is your training program being different. This will help you build better convergence in the organization. Secondly, the techniques that and tools that you train them on. If you train them on something like managing people better, it should not be run of the mill, because Apple is about thinking different. How thinking different, in quotes, is your program? That's the real question. Okay, and also convergence is about one of the things, in my view, which makes an organization, a team, a department, is that they're all moving towards a common goal. Your training program should support that common goal and not work against it. To give you an example, just say there's a department on customer service. Their common goal is customer first. Okay, and you go there and do a training program. Your program is on communication, and you send out some things, you say some things, and you train them on something which basically says, if your communication is right, don't care about the customer. Then you're defeating the larger purpose of, if somebody asked me earlier, this part of it, performance enhancement, maybe you get a good feedback, but eventually maybe that team's customer service ratings would go down because of your program. And in that case, I think somewhere you have missed the plot. Okay. We have a question here from, okay, we are almost close to finishing time, so I'll take these couple of questions. Uh, Nayan says, can you please explain convergence? Okay, Nayan, I just did that, so I hope you heard that, Nayan. Uh, who's this? Harsh says, sometimes few audience ask questions which they already know, and from our internal gut feeling, we know that this employee knows the answer. This makes me angry and lose my temper, which made me discomfort during presentation. Okay, how to handle the situation? Okay, so first of all, Harsh's basic question is, sometimes people ask you questions, participants, they ask you questions which they already have the answer for, and they're asking you just to sometimes show off, or, and so on. And Harsh says, you lost your temper and so on. First of all, my first view on this is, as a trainer, there is no reason whatsoever for you to get angry, lose your cool, or be knocked off balance. That's really the starting point. If you're able to do that, a lot of other things will fall in place. Second, if somebody wants to ask a question to show off, yeah, so what? In fact, one of the things that I've done is recently I did a program and there was a guy called Manish. I said, Manish, I just feel that you asked that question and you already knew the answer, Manish. And when you bring the truth out into the open, people are willing to, people to change their behavior. So you can try that out, Hush. That's something that always works. Bring the truth out into the open. Okay, so Nayan, you got convergence. Thanks. That's nice to know. Spurti, is it like knowing your customer best can turn the training a better way success? Yes, Spurti, you're right in that. Harsh says thank you. Okay, so folks, I'm sorry, I'm really running out of time here. So we are at the Q&A session, but we have really taken the questions, and in the interest of being professional, I want to start and finish this, session on time. So that's really what I have to say. Thanks a lot for taking part in this webinar. I hope you found this session useful. I look forward to seeing some of you in, Train the Trainer certification workshops. The upcoming dates will be put up on the screen, on the chat screen by some members of our internal team. The next few dates, I think it's already there, so you can take a look at it. And if you do come for our programs, I look forward to meeting you. Thanks, Ben. Thanks for putting up those dates. So thank you very much, everybody. Thanks a lot for the participation. I think there are some of you really made this presentation and webinar interesting because of the questions you asked. Thanks a lot for that. And I really look forward to seeing you in the next webinar. Thank you very much. Have a nice day ahead and enjoy the rest of your week.